it was a huge part of the community as well. And for myself, I remember Ken and Doris Lister running the store.
I think they ran it too when I was...
Yes, I think I can't remember, because it was always them when I remember. I'm not sure when they came.
No, I'm just trying to think of who opened it or had it before the Listers moved in. But I probably was in about grade 4, grade 5 when the Listers moved in.
I just remember
and
they
had, but it was very critical. We used to ride horseback between the little community of Seebe and the store to get our groceries. I remember at one point riding into the store to get something for Mom and Dad's anniversary, and the only thing I could find was two china cups and saucers, and it was fantastic that I got them from the store back to the house on bareback on Ginger.
Yeah. And they had the post office was there.
They had the post office, yeah.
Yes, it was the Seebe post office.
It was just
as well.
it was very.
But I do remember
critical.
in the early years, once a week, our parents ordered meat from Cochrane. They'd phone in their order, and I don't know how it was brought.
Probably trucked in. They had a locker in Cochrane.
Because they'd phone down to the Cochrane, was it Anderson's?
Anderson's store, which was my aunt and uncle's store.
And they'd phone their order weekly, and it would come.
They also had a meat locker there that we accessed to, so that they probably brought meat in as well.
I remember my mom doing that. Yeah.
And there were a lot of dry goods in the store as well, because the people from the west end of the Morley Reserve also used the store quite a bit, and so there were bolts of material for sewing and things like that in there as well. And our address was General Delivery, Seebe, Alberta. Yeah. And then when we got postal codes, it was T0L1X0.
And we were on a party line for our phones too. If you had to phone out of Seebe, you had to phone down to the control center, and they phoned you out of Seebe.
But coming back to the store, there was one gas pump there out at the front of the store that was used for fuel.
Yeah, I remember that.
We always kind of laughed and said, yes, we come from a one gas pump community.
One gas pump, one curling rink.
One
sheet of ice, yep.
The curling rink itself had one sheet of ice that was natural to start with, and later the fellows put in, the workers put in an artificial plant so they could have an artificial one sheet of ice, which became known in the Guinness Book of Records as the only one sheet curling rink in the world, which is kind of interesting. But it was built in 1948. My dad and Albert Northcott, who was a carpenter for Calgary Power at that point, got together and decided it'd be a really good idea to build a curling rink, but it also would be a good way to use the construction buildings that had been left at the Barrier Power Plant development that was completed in 47. So when all the materials were taken out of those little buildings, storage buildings, they were shipped, however, down the little gravel road from Barrier to Seebe, put end to end, and then sealed up and the roof put on, and a little waiting room added on. And that became our curling rink. So it opened in 1948. It closed when the community itself closed.
Yes, yeah. So they did have one final big curling tournament there in the last year.
Yep.
Yeah, and in later years they also built a kitchen and
little bar area
and so on.
Had a place to sit.
And so
waiting room area.
Yeah, it became another center of Seebe, like the school was during the winter, especially when there were tournaments, bonspiels going on, because then they always had somebody there cooking, hamburgers and grilled cheese sandwiches and soup and stuff like that. And so it was like a little clubhouse, and people who weren't curling still came over to watch the curling, and I can remember it was after Greg and I were married and I had moved back to Seebe that they actually even put in a camera at the far end of the rink so that the people who were watching from the one end of the rink could actually see where the stones were sitting. It was very up to date.
And that was before its time too, because they didn't usually, and I'm speaking curling rinks didn't usually have an extra camera down at the far end. They do now, but in those days, Seebe was avant-garde in their use of the camera at the far end to see how the rocks were sitting and that. But coming back to the earlier days, it was a real feat to be able to get into the Seebe Bonspiel. It was very highly sought Bonspiel because everybody had such a good time there. My husband's an avid curler and has been for years, and won the Bonspiel many, many years, and always has good memories of all the times that they were there. We too, as young people growing up, we all started to curl when we were 12.
We had to be 12.
You had to be 12 to start curling. Because then they felt we were old, big enough and strong enough to lift the rock. And I know in my case, my dad would not let me lift the rock.
No, because
I
still
was too
to this
small.
day they don't lift the rock when I curl.
Either.
And Mr. Davidson taught us to curl.
Mr. Davidson
This
was
is a
our
school
teacher at the school for many years.
years.
Yeah.